which was really exciting. But I'm saying all that now to kind of paint a picture that when I was 7 years old and I'd moved across, I knew none of that. I was ignorant.
Yeah,
I was
just a little kid.
Just a little kid, right? So now that I know all these things, it kind of puts my mind at ease. But then I was just a kid who had left his entire life and all his friends that he'd ever known, and his toys, and his home and his house, to jump into a car with his parents to move to another country. And it was kind of exciting in a way, I'm not going to lie. But then once the reality of the situation hit us, it was quite hard.
Yeah, it's not like a holiday and where you just
It wasn't
pop over.
a holiday, no.
So at first it would have been like, oh, that's exciting, we're going on a road trip.
Yeah.
But then you realise you're not going back to what was home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I realised that we were actually, maybe later on, again, my parents told me this, that we were one of a few families that were actually able to escape. We didn't leave by choice. Obviously, my dad had managed to find work in Zambia.
Yeah.
So imagine, like, they'd owned their own farms. They were affluent in a way, lucky to be so, especially at that time. But they were very affluent, and then the currency crashed. And let's say you had a pension, you'd saved $1 million in your life. Overnight, it's all gone.
How old were your parents?
Oh, my mum was like 30, in her late 30s. My dad had maybe just turned 50. My stepdad.
Crazy. Imagine just painting that picture. Like, you've worked your entire life. Imagine you're having kids. You're in your 30s, so you think, okay, this is like my life is, as you would say, cushy. Like, I'm nice and comfortable.
I did it.
Yeah, like your mum bought her first house. Like,
she bought her
literally
first house.
imagine being in that stage of your life where you're like, okay, I'm in my 30s, I've got a child, I've got a house, like my life is going so great, and then all of a sudden, all of the money that you've had is worth nothing.
Yeah.
That happened to my
And there's
granddad.
nothing you can do about it.
That's insane.
In Russia, there was a similar sort of like financial crash, and my granddad had been saving his entire life to buy this car. Like, he just kept putting money away, and then when he was ready to buy the car, the day before, the what's called money crashed, whatever that's called, financial crash, and it was worth nothing. And then he literally became an alcoholic after it.
Oh no.
He was like,
nothing left to live for.
Yeah.
And that's happened in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's very, very sad. And a lot of my friends who are now living abroad or have been lucky enough to study abroad, or their parents could send them abroad because they maybe had squirreled away some money in the UK, or maybe they had a British passport or an Irish passport, or some people had Greek passports, or whatever, whose grandparents were not from Zimbabwe. They were able to leave. But those people who couldn't leave, it's like a time bubble. I can't explain it. And only people who have moved out of Zimbabwe or out of Africa and have come back have gone, oh my God, why have people changed in Zimbabwe? But they haven't. They've just not changed. We have.
Yeah.
We've come here, had our minds expanded. I had no idea what existed out there.
Yeah, tell us more about that. Like, about how you perceived it, where you lived in Zambia. How did your life progress after that? Rather than, what was it like for you?
I mean, it depends what stage.
So you moved to Zambia.
So after I moved to Zambia.
And where did you live?
That was the hardest part. So we moved to Zambia. We had no money, or very little money, and we had to find a place to live. So we lived with, I think it was like 7 other families. I mean, maybe 5 other families, but these were like extended families. So, you know, parents, 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah.
But I think it was up to like maybe 7 families in one house. We used to call it the Big Brother house.
How big was the house? How many bedrooms roughly, if you can remember?
Maybe like 10 bedrooms.
Yeah.
So it was like a big like
it's a lot of people.
A big like colonial house. I would call it a colonial house because it would have been built a very long time ago. It was huge, and it had a swimming pool, it had like a squash court, that kind of thing. But you know, bear in mind, there's 7 families here, so it was like 20 people.
Yeah.
So 20 people. It's like a boarding school.
It's like your party never leaving.
Pretty much. And obviously the adults, it was really hard. And again, I'm not the right person to speak about this because I was very young when this happened. But adults would be coming from Zimbabwe who had their farms or their livelihoods taken from them. The stories, even at a young age, hearing stories of people being, you know, hurt through the battle of trying to leave their farms or similar, or being, you know, people not making it out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
People who are unable to do so. Abuse, physical, sexual.
That's literally what I jumped to straight away.
And you know, I don't want to talk about that because again, it's not my story.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we lived in this house and it was pretty crazy. It was pretty hectic. I think we lived there maybe about a year or so.
Did you get along with other kids? Did you make pals?
I did. I had some friends who even now I think at one point there was one person who was kind of like my brother because I was only 7 and my 2 sisters are much older than me. So they really left home thankfully before this happened in Zimbabwe. And yeah, it was pretty hard. So you don't really have your own space. I was sharing a room, which is not that bad, but it was all new to me. So it was a new country, new friends, new school, and I was in boarding school as well. So I think even for the first 2 years, or the first couple of years of or at least the first year of my boarding school life in Zambia, I apparently was so scared to go play sport and stuff. I would hide under my bed.
Oh,
yeah, because obviously it's a big change for
yeah,
kids.
because even we moved, me and the kids moved like literally only like an hour away. Like, you know, they're like the only real change was like obviously schools and our house. And like Aldous, who's just my wee sensitive soul, like literally he went from being very like confident, like, do you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden that first year when we moved, like he was just an anxiety mess. Like he wouldn't, like we went trick-or-treating and he was terrified to go up to the doors and say anything. But eventually he did do it. Luckily him and Brody have like a good, for some reason, I don't know if this is other moms can relate.
Relationship.
Yeah, like when he says no to something, if I try to convince him or try to make him feel better, he gets really stubborn and hard-headed. But like Brody has that magic touch where he can say the most magical thing to him to make Aldous like be okay with it. Like, do you know what I mean? So him and Brody just went and like had like a wee chat, and then he went up and then he was like, what was I so scared of? Like, do you know? But that
nice.
was like a very small move and small change. So I can't imagine how anxious, and again, he was 7 when we moved. So like how you would have felt, especially is boarding school for you like where you live there during the week and come home for the weekends? Or
so there's different types.
Yeah.
But yes, I was like a weekend boarder, or like a weekday boarder. So I'd be there during the week and my parents would pick me up. So initially that was kind of okay because my parents lived in town.
And you were 7 when you started going?
I first started boarding school when I was 5.
Oh.
I know, it was quite
so
hectic.
young.
But again, bear in mind, when I first started boarding school at 5 in Zimbabwe, again, this is what most people do because it's quite a big country, and most people spread out. A lot of the best schools are boarding schools.
Yeah.
Because again, you have like this unit, this environment that you live in. And my mum was a single mum, and we lived on a farm. And my boarding school that I went to was like 3 hours away from the farm that we lived on.
Yeah.
So there was just no way I could be a day scholar, right? So anyway, the same thing happened in Zambia. My parents needed to work. My mum couldn't work initially because she didn't have a work permit, but my dad did. So it was really hectic on her, and also hectic on my dad because, you know, we had nothing.
Yeah.
We went from having everything to having nothing overnight. Which is crazy because most people have, like, even now, I think, you know, I've got a little bit of savings, you know, I would love to buy a house in the future, that kind of thing. I've worked for myself for a long time, and you've got to think about paying the bills, you know, money in and money out. And you've got a little bit of float. You've got an overdraft that you can rely on. Or maybe you've got your parents who might be able to help you in a really terrible situation. And some people don't.
Yeah.
Imagine that as an adult when you're maybe 50 or in your late 30s.
No,
and you
you're
lose
meant to be
everything.
that person.
You're meant to be the person to help others, but you can't.
Yeah.
You're relying on only yourself. You know, and there's no debt. You can't just take out like an overdraft in Africa. It's just, or at least in most parts of Africa, you can't just take out money. It's just not, it doesn't happen.
Oh my God.
So anyway, this Big Brother house that we lived in, if you've ever watched Big Brother, it's kind of like lots of people in a house together, and you see how they kind of interact. And that was pretty much that. So it was a very interesting vibe. Anyway, we moved on to another house, and then another house, and we eventually moved on to another farm when I was about 9 years old. And again, still in
that's
boarding
a lot
school.
of change.
And I started to kind of like come out of my shell a bit, maybe when I was at 8 or 9. But it was a really hard transition. I had some great teachers. I had some great friends as well.
That's
who,
nice.
You know, really helped me to open up. But, you know, as I got older, I think I didn't have the same sort of stability that I wanted. My dad was having to do a lot of jobs that he didn't want to do, and his farming investments and the project he was doing were hard. He didn't have the backing he did. It wasn't the same market conditions that it was in Zimbabwe. People were different. People had come from Zimbabwe to Zambia, and they'd gone through a lot of turmoil and a lot of trouble. A lot of them were psychologically scarred. I remember sitting at the like breakfast table outside in a house that we lived in when I was maybe like 11. We moved a lot. We moved the first 3-4 years of my life in Zambia. We moved like all the time. We
Damn,
moved
I didn't know that.
quite
That's
a lot.
nuts.
We moved every 6 months or so, or 12 months. Just trying to find somewhere new.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's other challenges surrounding that, money and similar. Anyway, we sat down to the table with this guy, and there were a couple people, but this guy was most memorable. He'd been wearing the same pair of shoes every day for like, I don't know, 2 years.